Henry leaves nursing school to accept a doorman job after his father passes away. He gets closer to one of the residents in the building, Scarlett, whose family disapproves of him. Paco is very excited about handball and easily beats Shaquan. He's sure to bag the championship and wants to celebrate his victory. John challenges Paco next, but he doesn't want to play with an old man. John keeps riling Paco till he agrees to a handball face-off. John feels a little out of shape but keeps playing with him. John soon feels very exhausted and collapses on the floor. John's wife, Grace, and her daughter, Caitlin, discuss how much he loved handball. They're sure he's happy he breathed his last on the court. They also know he shouldn't have played at all in this heat because of his condition. Grace remembers they should head out before John's brother, Colin, breaks something. Colin knows that John always wanted a wake with his friends and family, getting drunk and telling stupid stories. He gets emotional about John and discusses how he was a great husband to Grace. He is also remembered as a great father to Caitlin and Henry. He started his own business, and Colin feels like he's probably challenging Jesus Christ to a handball game in the sky right now. Colin reminds Henry that he's the head of the household now. He introduces Henry to Charles Doyle, who was John's attorney. Charles informs Henry that his family is broke and has substantial debts. Henry already knows that his father is not good with money. He still remembers a life insurance policy. Charles explains that John's insurance company had warned him against activities such as handball. They thought it was a health risk, which is why his passing isn't covered in the scheme. There is no insurance money for the family and no business to carry forward. John also had no assets. Colin heads back to work and asks Henry to feel grateful that John left doing what he loved. Henry approaches Dean Swift at his nursing school. She offers condolences for his father. She asks for his help with a model she's working on for Miss Abel's class. Swift feels bad Henry is leaving nursing school in the middle when his grades are improving. Henry assures her it's only temporary. Swift asks him to pass the rectum, but he hands over an ovary. Swift believes he should be able to recognize the organs by now. Henry assures her he will complete the coursework, but he needs money now. Swift gives him 2 years to make up for the remaining classes. Henry enters an elite apartment building on 5th Avenue and asks for George. After the doorman calls him, George takes Henry to his office. George asks Henry only to use the front door when he's in uniform. George is doing a favor to his old friend Colin by giving Henry a job. George wonders if Henry thinks he's doorman material after not becoming a nurse. Henry tries to explain why he couldn't finish the course, but George claims that he does not care about his past. George has worked at the building for 15 years. Colin's good references were enough for him to hire Henry. He still wants Henry to abide by all the rules very strictly. He thinks it's most important not to let anyone enter the building who is not supposed to be there. George knows it's not easy being a doorman and asks Henry to focus on the details. Henry is supposed to learn everyone's names and not get friendly with the residents. If his interactions are found to be anything other than professional, he will be thrown out. That's not scary at all. George asks Henry to take Raoul's help if he has any questions. Henry hears Meredith Dowling arguing with her daughter Scarlett about her birthday party. Meredith is making a big deal of it, even if Scarlett doesn't care. When George introduces Henry as the new doorman, he exchanges a look with Scarlett. Meredith asks George about the caterer he is supposed to handle. She also hands over some bags to Henry when he tries to shake her hand. Scarlett doesn't let him take her bags. He accompanies them to the penthouse, where Meredith asks Henry to keep the bags in Scarlett's room. She also tips him. Scarlett catches Henry looking at her photo and wonders if he likes it. Henry instantly feels awkward and insists he wasn't snooping. Grace reads an ad about a job where classy ladies earn $5,000 a week. Caitlin assures her they are looking for hookers. Grace keeps browsing through jobs that seem more appropriate. She hasn't had a job in 20 years, but needs to do something now. Caitlin assures her that the employers will love her. Grace asks Caitlin not to mention this to Henry. He asks about what they are discussing after overhearing the last part. Henry doesn't want Grace to look for a job. Grace doesn't want to give up the house they have lived in for 15 years so easily. Henry explains that she doesn't need to work because Colin got him a job as a doorman. Grace is touched that Henry quit nursing school to take care of her. Henry explains that it's just a leave of absence till he rejoins. Caitlin teases him about being a doorman. She thinks he will know very soon what's wrong with it. Raoul is working with Henry during the night shift. He asks Henry to get his uniform from the locker room. Henry checks Francisco's breathing in the locker room as he sleeps. Francisco wakes up and feels like Henry was touching him inappropriately. Henry explains to George that something seems wrong with Francisco's chest. He admits that he's only concerned after studying to be a nurse. George reminds Henry that he's working as a doorman. He wants Henry to ignore whatever is wrong with Francisco and get dressed. Francisco doesn't understand what Henry means by his obstructive breathing, so Henry leaves. Raul knows Henry also feels hot in the woolen uniform. He rants about how no air conditioning can save them from sweating. Raul is impressed that Henry managed to properly converse with Francisco, who is usually asleep. The Silvermans start arguing before heading out for a trip. Debbie feels the need to take a pill before their nightmare of a romantic anniversary getaway. That sounds promising. Mr. Silverman informs Henry and Raul that they will be back on Sunday. He asks Bobby not to party in the meantime. Debbie also tips Henry so he can take care of Bobby when they're away. Henry tries to be nice to Bobby, but he shows him the middle finger. Raul calls for food that he can eat with Henry without anyone noticing. Raul wonders why Henry chose nursing school instead of wanting to be a doctor. Henry explains that he doesn't have the money for medical school and didn't get the scholarship. Raul takes off in the middle of the night and is sure Henry can manage without him. Raul knows George is mostly asleep, but asks Henry to cover for him if he turns up. Henry feels bored during the rest of his shift at night. Some girls outside admire how cute he is. Two women, who claim to be Mercedes and Portia, ask to see Roberto in the building. Henry knows Bobby is on the other side of the phone. Bobby insists he is Roberto and asks Henry to let the women in. Henry reluctantly allows them, even if he knows he'll get in trouble. Gretchen brings Scarlett's drunk boyfriend, Buck, into the building. Henry opens the door again to let Scarlett in. Henry makes fun of Buck for drinking too much. Buck denies it but instantly pukes in the lobby. Scarlett assures Gretchen she can take care of Buck from there. Scarlett isn't comfortable with Henry's offer of cleaning up Buck's puke. Buck wants Henry to clean it since he's the doorman. Scarlett asks Buck to stop being a jerk. Henry assures her he cleans up puke all the time at school. He doesn't give details but assures Scarlett that he will manage it. He also asks Scarlett to provide Buck with some fruit juice and aspirin for his hangover. As Henry cleans the puke, he remembers what Raul suggested about night shifts being uneventful. A pimp threatens Henry to send his prostitutes downstairs. Henry asks Bobby to send down the girls as soon as possible. The pimp wonders if Bobby is the same Roberto who owes him money. Bobby cannot pay him since he can't use his dad's credit card. Bobby asks to borrow $200 from Henry and promises to return it. Henry takes out the cash and asks the pimp to let Bobby go. Bobby promises to repay Henry if he doesn't mention this incident to his parents. Henry asks Bobby to return it soon, since $200 is a lot of money for him. Henry takes a little nap and wakes up to George. He pretends he's just taking a little break, but George asks him to get used to night shifts. When he asks about Raul, he magically appears with coffee in his hand. Raul explains that he has picked up on George's habits in his 8 years there. Henry heads home and directly crashes into his bed. He wakes up to a lot of dogs barking. Caitlin is caring for them since she's trying to make extra cash. Grace is also fine with the dogs when they don't make too much noise. Henry gets annoyed when he learns that Grace is also working now, but returns to sleep. When Henry arrives for his shift, Bobby sends him a letter with his $200. Henry lets a gay couple in who are arguing about who can sing better. Their dog, Cassius, enters the elevator when Ray and his partner are still debating songs. Henry notices Cassius being dragged up in the elevator with the leash. He instantly presses some buttons to bring Cassius back to their level. The couple is worried because Cassius isn't moving. As a crowd gathers, Henry takes over in the elevator and tries to revive the dog. He performs a few tricks he knows about to help Cassius gain consciousness. Everyone is impressed with Henry, and the couple warmly thanks him. Scarlett also praises Henry for the way he handled the situation. George notices the look Henry shares with Scarlett. He reminds Henry not to get personal with the guests. He's still very intrigued and impressed with how Henry performed CPR on a dog. Nursing school is finally paying off. Henry decides to take a flower delivery for Scarlett to her place. Scarlett's dad, Philip, tries to tip Henry. When he heads inside, Scarlett asks Henry to bring the flowers to her room. Henry admires her room, but Scarlett hates it. She doesn't like that her mother has had a say in the decoration. She helps him with something stuck on his nose. She wonders if Henry is a vet because of how he saved the dog. Henry explains that he's almost a nurse and had to take some time off. Before he can explain why, Buck comes to the room. Buck hopes she likes the flowers he sent and hopes Scarlett is not mad at him for last night. He insists that the cocktails were made badly. He also asks her to get ready for going out that night. Grace's boss, Laszlo, brings her a green tea chai latte with a tablet for extra energy. He hopes she's happy with the work and brags about her sitting on their bestseller chair. He wants her to be happy to make the customers happy. She assures him she's a people person, and he asks her to keep up the excellent work. At Scarlett's birthday party, Henry starts ushering all the guests in. Philip discusses his trip to Japan with the guests while Buck gets drunk before the party. Buck compliments Meredith a little too much. Scarlett wonders why she puts up with Buck when he's always high. Gretchen thinks he's good-looking and rich, but Scarlett hopes she's not that shallow. Philip asks for everyone's attention to make a speech for Scarlett's 21st birthday. He brags about changing her diaper and teaching her how to ride a bike. He loves that she has grown into the sophisticated woman she is that day. He toasts to her for being a great child. As her birthday present, he gives her a car she loves. Buck takes Jake to a room so they can do coke. Jake asks him not to destroy Scarlett's baby picture, but Buck doesn't care. Buck takes a huge sniff and asks Jake not to be scared. As Jake tries to process what's happening, Buck falls to the ground. Jake comes to get Scarlett since Buck is passed out in her bathroom. He admits after a lot of provocation that Buck did too much coke. Philip asks someone to call an ambulance, but there's no doctor to perform first aid. Scarlett asks Meredith to call Henry urgently since he's a nurse. Meredith calls Raoul at the front desk, who sends Henry upstairs. Gretchen welcomes Henry to the room, and Scarlett explains that he was doing coke. Henry tries whatever he can to help Buck, but CPR doesn't work. He asks the crowd to move back so he can try hitting him on the chest. Buck gains consciousness just as help also arrives. The paramedic is impressed that Henry hit him with the pericardial thump when CPR didn't work. He informs everyone that Buck is lucky because few people know how to do the thump. Things are indeed looking up. Henry gets down and tries to process the idea that he saved someone's life. Jake tries to tip Henry for what he did with Buck and starts writing a check for $200. Henry refuses to take money to save someone's life, so Raoul asks Jake to write his name. Fair enough. Henry assures Jake that his well wishes are enough for him without the money. Henry doesn't feel right about getting paid for this, but Raoul asks him to think of his crew, who all need that money. Scarlett also thanks Henry for saving Buck's life. She remembers that even the paramedic believed he did. Henry is trying to process the fact that he did something he has never done before. He has practiced it in school, but never performed it on someone in a critical situation. Scarlett opines that Henry looked absolutely in control of the situation. She thinks he's very sweet and talented and hugs him. Henry freaks out when George notices them. This can't be good. Henry claims he was comforting Scarlett, but George gives him a last warning. Caitlin asks about Henry's doorman job and if he has any good stories. Henry feels it's making him humble. He asks Caitlin if she would date a very poor guy. Caitlin assures Henry that the good girls don't care about money. They like the guy to be strong and assertive with them. Caitlin knows Henry is asking all this because he likes someone. She assumes she must live in the building where he's working. Caitlin wonders if Scarlett is a trust fund kid and if Henry asked her out. Henry is sure rich girls from Fifth Avenue don't date their doormen. He also knows he can get fired for it. I can picture George's face. Henry asks Scarlett about Buck, who is in rehab. Scarlett wants to thank him by taking him somewhere as a surprise. Henry tries to sound professional when George is around. Scarlett understands what he's doing but assures George that he's their best doorman. George also jokes about how Henry surely has a way with residents. That is a scary joke. When he leaves, Henry insists it's not a good idea for him to come with her. He explains that George can fire him for being friends with her. Scarlett insists they can have a fake meeting instead. She asks him to meet her at the pier on West Side Highway the next day. Henry wants to hang out with her, so he agrees. Henry doesn't care when Scarlett arrives late for their date. He thinks she looks beautiful. He tries to buy tickets for them, but his card gets declined. Scarlett insists she wanted to treat him anyway. They roam around and have a great time with each other. Scarlett wonders why he decided to be a doorman when he's studying to be a nurse. Henry explains that his uncle Colin, who has been a doorman forever, got him this job. He admits that after his dad died, his mom was left with a lot of debt. He claims he did it to earn money fast. Henry discusses how amazing the Statue of Liberty looks. Scarlett jokes about him making her jealous. She tries to quote a poem she doesn't fully know, so Henry continues it. She can tell he's showing off for her. He assures her it's only because it's one of the few poems he remembers. He kisses her in the moment, and she kisses him back. They walk back to the hotel, but Henry stops a little distance from her place. She kisses him again, but the doorman on duty almost catches them. Meredith is gossiping with a friend when she finds a photo of Henry and Scarlett on the camera. She immediately calls George. Henry explains to George that he met Scarlett for a meeting, but George doesn't buy it. George doesn't care that Scarlett took him out to thank him for saving Buck. George fires Henry for breaking all the rules and not giving the job any importance. Henry tries to call Scarlett before leaving, but George throws him out. Scarlett tries to leave a letter for Henry with Raoul, but he insists on calling George. Scarlett doesn't understand why he's being cold. Caitlin is impressed that Henry got fired because of a girl. Henry is afraid of losing their house because he doesn't know how to get another job. Caitlin knows Henry is smart enough to get another job soon. She's more worried about what he will do about Scarlett. Henry doesn't want to do anything because her family got him fired. He believes that he will always be a doorman to those people. Caitlin assures him they won't lose the house. Grace has a great job and is handling the finances well. Scarlett finds a letter and knows that Meredith got Henry fired. Meredith refuses to let Scarlett date the help, but Scarlett reminds her that Henry is also a human. Meredith doesn't understand why she would want to date a doorman. Scarlett knows Meredith is afraid of reputation and calls her an elitist snob. Meredith still thinks she is trying to do the best thing for her. Scarlett insists that she will date whoever she wants. She also makes it clear that it will depend on the kind of person they are, more than their station in life. Scarlett asks George to hire Henry back, but he refuses to do so according to the rules. He doesn't even give her Henry's number when she asks. Scarlett gets angry again and decides to find it out herself. She starts calling people, but realizes that there are 76 people by the same name. She's still determined to contact him somehow. Caitlin comes to Fifth Avenue with her dogs and asks for Scarlett. Raoul is uncomfortable with animals in the lobby. Caitlin assures him they will behave. She informs him that she's Henry's sister and needs to talk to Scarlett. Raoul misses Henry and is surprised he has a sister he didn't know about. Caitlin wants Henry to return to nursing school and feels like Scarlett can help. Caitlin explains that Henry left nursing school when their dad passed away. Raoul feels terrible since he didn't know about this. When Scarlett gets down to meet her, Caitlin takes her outside for a walk. Scarlett admits that she feels terrible about what happened to Henry. She remembers him mentioning he might get fired, but she forced him on the date anyway. Caitlin insists Henry got fired because of his mistake. She knows he can easily get another job. She's just glad to hear that Scarlett feels terrible about it. Scarlett wants to help in any way, but Caitlin insists he needs to just get back to nursing school. Scarlett agrees with that since she thinks Henry's talents are wasted as a doorman. When Henry tries to meet Grace at work, he finds himself in an erotic store. Henry starts judging the people there and doesn't want his mother to work in a place like this. Grace insists it's a video store, but Henry keeps thinking it's a place for the sick and the perverted. He tries to talk to her outside, but Laszlo comes to congratulate her on the work for the dildo display. That's not making it better. Grace happily introduces Henry, but he insists that she must resign. Laszlo reminds him that she's the employee of the week. Laszlo asks Henry to understand that Grace working there makes the customers feel more relaxed and comfortable. He believes that Grace is great for business and wants her to continue working for them. Laszlo wishes his own mother was as hot and non-judgmental as Grace. Now that's awkward. Henry tries to make her leave, but Grace doesn't want to quit a job where she's so respected. Laszlo also makes her the assistant manager with hourly pay. Henry keeps trying to convince Grace to find another job. When Scarlett also turns up at the store, Henry is conscious of what Scarlett will think of this place. Grace tries to sell an adult film to Scarlett, which makes things worse for Henry. A man tries to take his coat off because of the heat. Henry assumes he's not wearing anything inside and tries desperately to stop him. Scarlett explains that Caitlin led her to the shop. She admits she tried very hard to find his number. She feels very bad for getting him fired. Grace is very cool about this development, but Henry takes Scarlett outside to talk. Scarlett tries to get Henry another job, but he asks her to stop helping him. Henry insists he can take care of himself and his family. She asks him not to be rude about it. Scarlett admits she likes him and wants to see him again. Henry knows her mother would never approve of a guy like him. He feels like he has nothing to offer her and can't even take her for a proper dinner. Scarlett lets him know that she doesn't care about all that. She can also tell from his frustration that he can't understand her feelings. He reminds her that she's from Fifth Avenue, and a guy like him can never keep up. She gets angry about his resistance and walks off. Caitlin and Grace wonder where Scarlett went. Henry refuses to explain what happened between them. Caitlin fills Grace in about everything that happened between Henry and Scarlett. Henry is sure this will never work, because Scarlett is a millionaire. He describes all the amenities they have in the house, which he can never provide for her. He believes that people like Scarlett's family are too different from them. He thinks that he will be a nurse at best, while his dad is just a plumber. He's also embarrassed that his mother works in a shop and his sister is a dog walker. Grace asks him to stop insulting himself and the family. She doesn't want him to label the entire world. She reminds him that John was more than a plumber. She remembers him as a kind man who loved people and his family. She doesn't feel any girl is good enough for Henry, even if she's rich and pretty. She wants Henry to know any girl would be lucky to be loved by him. Henry decides to head to Fifth Avenue and asks Raoul for Scarlett. Raoul insists that the whole family left for the Gotham Club. He feels bad about Henry's dad and wants to help. Henry is in a rush to find Scarlett and doesn't listen to Raoul's warnings about him not being allowed. The cab driver Rajib wonders why Henry is in a hurry. He thinks that women should not be trusted because his ex-wife took everything from him. Henry gives Scarlett's name to the doorman. Henry is still not allowed inside without a proper coat and tie. Henry tries to give a message and offer his identification cards, but the doorman doesn't budge. Henry sneaks in from another entrance and steals the chef's uniform to blend in. He slowly tries to approach Scarlett, but drops some plates and creates a scene. Philip is impressed that Henry dressed as a chef to meet Scarlett. He remembers Henry as the guy who saved Buck. Meredith reminds Philip that he's the doorman. Like anyone needs more reminders. Meredith asks the club's staff to throw Henry out. Henry resists them and asks Scarlett to hear him out. He promises not to bother her if she doesn't want to talk after this. He admits he was wrong earlier and doesn't care if she's richer than him. He hasn't stopped thinking about her since he saw her at the elevator. He knows he might never be rich or a member of a club, but that doesn't matter to him. Meredith tries to break up their party, but Scarlett insists she's going with Henry. Scarlett also announces loudly that Meredith's daughter is leaving with the doorman, so all the socialites can hear it. Meredith tries to stop her, but Philip stops Meredith from creating a scene when Scarlett walks off. Henry and Scarlett run into Buck and Gretchen on a date. Scarlett calls Gretchen a hooker, but Buck asks her not to take it seriously. Scarlett and Henry are happy with each other when they're outside, and he kisses her.